The Texas rain whispered down in thin, cold sheets, turning the cemetery grass to slick muck and soaking through black coats and cheap umbrellas. It felt like the kind of day that forgot how to be anything else. Gray, empty, and indifferent. James's mother stood at the edge of the grave, shoulders shaking, clutching a crumpled photograph of her 16-year-old son. She made no sound, but her grief poured out of her like smoke from a house fire, silent, but thick, choking, all-consuming. Her knees buckled once, and an older aunt caught her by the arm. There weren't many people there. A couple of relatives, 2 teachers in rain-spotted windbreakers. No friends, no classmates, no bullies. Tommy was the only kid from school who came. He stood apart, hoodie dark with rain, hands stuffed into his pockets, his shoes sinking slowly into the mud. No one looked at him, and he didn't look at anyone. His face was pale, unreadable, like a page no one had bothered to write on. The priest mumbled through the service, his voice flat and practiced, like he was reading instructions off a pamphlet. Dirt hit the casket in wet thuds. Nobody said James's name with any weight. Tommy stared at the grave and felt nothing, or maybe too much. Grief, guilt, anger, confusion. It all blurred together until it just felt heavy. He didn't cry. He just stood there in the rain, listening to the wind and the hollow shuffle of umbrellas. He didn't know what to do next. But something inside him, something quiet, shifted. New Orleans in July was a furnace, the kind of heat that didn't just sit on your skin, but crawled inside you, thick and damp, until your bones felt like they were sweating. Tourists waddled through the French Quarter like sleepwalkers, their sweat mixing with the scent of spilled beer and shrimp left too long in the sun. Tommy trailed behind his mother and Aunt Marie as they turned down Royal Street, yammering about jazz clubs and antique shops. Their voices blended with the noise of the city, high and light, as if pretending everything was fine. Tommy said nothing. His eyes stayed low, fixed on the cracks in the pavement, as if the ground might open up and swallow him whole. Everywhere he looked, the city pulsed with noise and life. Music spilling from open windows, barkers calling out ghost tours, clacking hooves of carriage horses. But it all felt like wallpaper to him. Busy. Hollow. Eventually, at a corner where the sidewalk cracked around the roots of a bloated old oak, he told them he wanted to walk on his own for a bit. Just 10 minutes, he said. His mother, distracted by her guidebook and trying too hard to smile, nodded without much of a fight. That's how he ended up in front of the Voodoo shop. It didn't look like much, just a narrow door between a pawn shop and a boarded-up bar. The sign overhead faded to near invisibility. But something about it tugged at him. Maybe it was the ironwork on the window, curled like spider legs. Or maybe it was the faint whisper of cold air that curled out as he opened the door. Inside, the air changed. Cooler. Still. The kind of quiet you didn't find outside. The walls were lined with shelves packed tight with strange little things. Dolls with button eyes, glass jars full of murky liquid, feathers, bones, bundles of herbs tied with red string. "Looking for something?" a voice asked, soft and dry like the rustle of paper. The woman behind the counter could have been 70 or 100. Her skin was dark and cracked like old leather, eyes sharp and glassy as marbles. She wore a faded shawl and a string of beads that clicked softly when she moved. Tommy shrugged. Just looking. But she looked at him the way some people look at stray dogs, like she could see the whole story in his posture. "You're carrying something heavy," she said. "Not on your back. In here." She tapped the side of her head with a yellowed fingernail. Tommy didn't answer. He didn't need to. She reached beneath the counter and came back up with a small cloth doll, roughly stitched, with a blank burlap face and fraying limbs. It looked handmade, old, but when she set it down, the room seemed to change, just a little. The air tightened, like the moment before a thunderclap. "A souvenir," she said, "but not for tourists." Tommy stared at it. What does it do? The woman's face didn't change. Her voice didn't rise, but something in her eyes darkened. "This doll is real," she said. "Old power in its belly. It drinks blood, yours or theirs, but not just blood, pain. That's the fuel." Tommy's throat felt dry. "It won't kill," she went on, "but it'll make them wish it did. That's its promise." He gave a little half laugh, trying to act like it was a joke, a tourist gag, but she didn't laugh back. "I'm serious, boy. Don't play with it unless you mean to pay the price." He nodded, still smirking, but the smirk didn't reach his eyes. He pulled a few bills from his wallet, tourist money, lunch money, and slid them across the counter. She didn't ask his name, didn't offer hers. He tucked the doll into the pocket of his hoodie and stepped back into the heat and noise of the street, the sound of a jazz trumpet echoing somewhere down the block. For a long while, he just walked. But the weight of the doll pressed against his side like a loaded gun, and the woman's words followed him like a shadow. The first day back at school after summer always hits like a wave of too much, too loud, too bright, too everything. Tommy stood at the edge of the main hallway, the noise washing over him like static. His backpack hung off one shoulder, light and empty, except for a few notebooks and a pencil. Kids poured through the halls in packs, slamming lockers shut with the careless energy of people who had never seen their friend buried. People who lived on the surface of things, where high school football mattered, nothing else. Tommy kept his head down, eyes flicking toward the orchestra room as he passed by. There, in the quiet hallway, was the first chair, viola seat, empty. It had been James's. The chair sat there like a hollow monument, untouched and ignored, for now. Eventually, it would be filled, and James completely forgotten. That empty chair carried all the weight of James's pain, pain no one else seemed to see. The bruises hidden beneath hoodies, the whispered insults, the afternoons he spent alone. The frustration of trying to matter in a school where only athletes and cheerleaders seemed to count. Where being invisible was the worst kind of loneliness. Tommy swallowed hard, his fingers twitching at the strap of his backpack. Classes passed like a blur. Teachers spoke, but their words floated past Tommy like dust motes in the sun. No one asked how he was. No one noticed he was there. Until lunch. Carson, Max, Drew, and Cole, the usual pack. They circled him in the cafeteria, sneers fixed like they'd been carved into their faces. "Hey Tommy," Carson said, voice dripping with mock sympathy. "You doing okay? You know, you could always kill yourself too. Join your little boyfriend James in the afterlife." Tommy said nothing. He stared at the bland cafeteria tray in front of him, the food tasteless and forgotten. They teased and pushed him all afternoon, a slow, grinding torment no one else bothered to stop. Because no one cared. That night, Tommy sat alone in his room, the voodoo doll tucked away and forgotten. It was just a thing, a trinket, wrapped up tight in an old cloth, lying silent on his desk. Nothing more than a souvenir. At least that's all it was to him, for now. Nobody touched Tommy on that first day back. Not a shove, not a slur, not even one of Carson's patented shoulder checks in the hall. It was like he was radioactive, or cursed. But by day 2, the amnesia had kicked in, like it always does. The bullies remembered who they were, and Tommy remembered who he wasn't. But Tommy had a plan. He remembered the old Creole woman at the edge of the French Quarter. Her shop had no name, just strings of wind chimes made from chicken bones and glass. He remembered the reek of shrimp and incense, the milky blur of her eyes, and the way she handed him the cloth-wrapped doll like it was something alive and waiting. She told him how to activate it. Blood, pain, intent. And now, standing in the boys' bathroom between 3rd and 4th period, Tommy did the unthinkable. He stared down Carson Malloy, the king of high school, the starting quarterback, a walking slab of teenage cruelty, and told him to meet him at the ditch after school, one-on-one. Carson blinked like he'd been slapped with a wet rag. Then he grinned. a mean, toothy grin that stretched like a rip in the universe. You? You want to fight me? Tommy didn't answer. He just turned and walked out, his legs quivering, his stomach a washing machine full of rocks. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to say he was kidding, that he'd had a stroke or something. But he didn't. The rest of the day was slow, like time had thickened. Every tick of the clock sounded like a taunt. Tommy couldn't eat lunch. He couldn't hear the lessons. The walls of the classrooms felt like they were closing in, whispering that this was stupid, that he was going to get broken, that even James would have said this was dumb, that the doll was just a souvenir, nothing more. But the deeper part of Tommy, the part that had watched James cry in silence and had done nothing, told him this was necessary. Maybe he didn't even believe in the doll. Maybe he just wanted to feel the pain James must have felt. Maybe this was penance. By 3:27 p.m., he was walking toward the ditch between the apartment complex and the practice football field, the one where all the real fights happened. The teachers never came out here. Hell, they probably pretended it didn't exist. The whole school had gathered like it was a damn pep rally. Kids stood shoulder to shoulder, recording with their phones, eyes lit up with bloodlust and digital glee. Not one adult. Not one. Carson showed up 10 minutes late, just to make sure the crowd had swelled. He strutted in, shirt off, flanked by his crew like some backwoods prince. The cheerleaders were already perched along the edge of the slope like vultures in glitter and gloss, sipping Starbucks and scrolling TikTok. Tommy stood alone, arms limp at his sides, the wrapped doll heavy in his backpack like a ticking clock. His heart felt like a hummingbird's wing against his ribs. He didn't believe in voodoo. Not really. But pain was something he did believe in. That he could count on. "Let's get this over with," Tommy said, though his voice cracked like old vinyl. Carson didn't answer. He just smiled. Then came the left hook, fast and mean, a blur of motion that cracked Tommy across the temple and sent him crumpling to the dirt. The crowd roared. Carson didn't stop. He climbed on top, fists raining down like hammers, pounding Tommy's face and ribs until the cheering dimmed, and even the other bullies started to exchange glances. For a second, Tommy thought Carson might kill him. There was a moment, brief and chilling, where Carson looked into his eyes and saw something that spooked him. Then, as if catching himself, Carson stood, panting, fists dripping with sweat and spit. The crowd went quiet. Carson's friends chuckled nervously. One of them muttered, "Dude almost snapped." Tommy staggered to his feet, blood in his mouth and dirt in his nose. This wasn't enough. He needed more. He needed them, the others. "You hit like a bitch," Tommy slurred, his voice wet and broken. "I've seen Girl Scouts with more bite." Carson's friends just laughed, turned their backs. One flipped Tommy the bird without even looking at him. They didn't take the bait. That's when Tommy lunged, wild, stupid, desperate, at another boy, catching him by surprise. For a second it worked, but then the bully twisted, grabbed Tommy by the shirt, and slammed him to the ground like a sack of laundry. The rest piled on, kicks, fists, knees, a blur of pain and noise. Then Carson strolled over to the cheerleaders. He leaned in and whispered something. They laughed, high-pitched and cruel. 3 of them sauntered over, drinks in hand. Tommy blinked up through one swollen eye, coughing blood, half-conscious. Without a word, they tipped their Starbucks cups over his head. Iced caramel macchiatos, pink drinks, and something with too much whipped cream. The cold liquid hit his skin like shame. They turned their backs as one and walked away, calling him a loser, their laughter trailing behind them like perfume. Tommy lay there, soaked and broken, tasting blood and vanilla syrup, feeling something deep inside him crack open, something that hadn't made a sound in years, something old. The doll stayed silent in his backpack, but not for long. "12:44 a.m. Tommy sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the thing in his lap. It was wrapped in an old dish towel that smelled faintly of garlic and mildew, tied with a fraying strip of leather. The corners were damp now, dark patches where the blood had soaked through. His blood. He'd pressed the wadded, torn shirt against it like the woman had shown him. "Cloth to cloth, pain to pain," she'd said, eyes white like milk and voice barely human. "Feed it what you bleed." He peeled back the towel. The doll was crude, not like a cartoon voodoo doll with buttons and a stitched-on frown. This one looked handmade, primitive. Its face was a smudge of something dark, maybe dried berries or ink or blood. Maybe all three. Tiny bone splinters were tied into its limbs with red thread, each one pricking out like thorns. And it was warm now. It hadn't been warm when he brought it home. Tommy held it in both hands, and as soon as his fingers closed around it, a jolt zipped up his arms, like static, like sticking a fork in a socket. He dropped it out of reflex. The doll didn't fall. It hovered there just for a second, maybe less, just long enough to make him think he was going insane. Then it dropped to the mattress with a soft thump. His heart was jackhammering in his chest. The doll twitched, not a spasm, a deliberate movement. Its tiny head lolled toward him like it was listening. Tommy swallowed hard. His hands were trembling, but he reached out and touched it again, this time gently, reverently. The fabric was pulsing beneath his fingertips, like it had a heartbeat. He pressed the torn shirt deeper into it, grinding the blood into the coarse stuffing. The whisper grew louder. Not just James now. Others. Names, faces, laughter that ended in screams. Locker doors slamming, skin hitting pavement. The ditch. The ditch. He could smell it again. Cigarette butts, coppery blood, the earthy stench of wet grass under his face. The doll vibrated in his hands. A warmth surged through his chest. Not physical warmth, but something deeper. A sick kind of light, terrifying and electric. It filled the empty spaces inside him, the ones scraped out by fists and boots and broken words. It felt good. It felt right. He didn't know what the doll was, not exactly, not yet. But it wanted something, needed something, and Tommy was ready to give it. He didn't speak aloud, but the thought came unbidden, clean and sharp, like a blade in the dark. Show me how. The doll pulsed once, then stilled. Tommy lay back in bed, still holding it against his chest like a child with a stuffed animal. He stared at the ceiling, wide-eyed, wired, waiting. Something had started, and it wasn't going to stop. Friday, 2:38 p.m., James Buchanan High School Gymnasium. It smelled like sweat and Axe body spray in the gym. Too many teenagers packed into metal bleachers, all yelling and clapping and stomping their feet like trained monkeys. The air was humid with hormones and cheap deodorant. Coaches wore fake smiles. Teachers looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. But the kids were loud. God, they were loud. The cheerleaders flipped and shrieked across the court, their white sneakers squeaking on polished wood. Someone in a bear mascot suit humped the air to the beat of "We Will Rock You." Principal Henley pretended not to notice. Tommy sat in the back row of the gym bleachers, shoulders pressed against the cinder block wall. He wasn't part of this world. He never had been. He watched the whole thing like it was on TV, like one of those grainy videos people find in attics after something awful happens. You know the ones? They always look normal at first, until you notice what's wrong in the background. The doll was inside his hoodie, tucked in the pocket like a warm stone. It pulsed against his ribs, a steady rhythm. Thump, 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 like a second heart. Across the gym, Tommy spotted Carson, captain of the football team, master of wedgies and hallway slams. He was center stage now, standing in a circle of cheerleaders. He soaked in the attention, arms spread wide like a smug little god. His Letterman jacket looked 2 sizes too small for his ego. Tommy reached into the hoodie pocket and touched the doll's chest. It was hot and humming. His fingers moved instinctively, like a musician tuning a guitar he didn't remember learning to play. He gripped the doll and twisted its leg, just slightly. On the gym floor, Carson flinched. He looked down like something had nipped him. Tommy twisted again, this time harder. Carson screamed, his body folding like a marionette with cut strings. His knee jutted the wrong way, grotesque and alien, bending backward with a sickening angle no human joint should ever make. "My leg! It's burning!" he shrieked, his voice climbing into something not unlike an animal cry. Principal Henley's microphone hit the hardwood with a screech that sliced through the gym like a razor. Tommy turned and walked out before anyone thought to look for the kid in the back. No one noticed. No one ever noticed him. The school didn't stop. It never did. Graduation was coming fast, and the hallways buzzed with nervous excitement. Caps and gowns being fitted, college acceptance letters proudly flashed, plans for summer jobs and parties whispered in every corner. Everyone talked about their bright futures like they could reach out and grab them. Everyone, that is, except the bully crew. Carson limped through the halls like a dethroned king, the crown of his youth twisted and cracked beneath him. But the pain wasn't just in his shattered leg, it was everywhere, burning in his skull, gnawing at his guts, slipping through his fingers like smoke that refuses to hold shape. His dreams? Gone. His future? Dust in the wind. Tommy stayed quiet after the pep rally, squeezing down the itch to go after the others. No quick moves, no fireworks. But now, with summer just a few days away, now was the time. No explosions, no screams, just the slow crawl of agony. Max stopped sleeping, stopped eating, whispering to ghosts that weren't there. Nurses shook their heads and called it a breakdown. But Tommy? He knew the doll was singing lullabies of madness every night. Drew's hands trembled so badly he couldn't hold a pencil straight. In class, his eyes darted to things no one else saw, hearing whispers in the air. His laughter shredded into jagged shards, sharp and grating, like glass scraping nails across a chalkboard. And Cole? Cole exploded, rage and confusion pouring out in violent bursts. His parents sent him to an institution, calling it a mental health crisis. Tommy watched the boy break apart like brittle twigs in a storm. All the while, Tommy kept the doll close enough to feel the heat of their suffering. No one connected the dots. No one saw the slow rot eating them from inside out. The school whispered stress, bad luck, mental health, convenient excuses for a poison no one knew how to fight. But Tommy knew. He was the quiet storm, the ghost in their nightmares, the slow, creeping shadow they never saw coming. And in the darkness of his room, the doll waited, because there were still debts to be paid. Paid by people that giggle and drink iced caramel macchiatos.